pretty much the same thing. So why does it matter? I said, you'll see. And they were both in that passed. Because the American voter is too stupid to understand the difference. You can't do it politically. You just literally cannot do it. Okay? Transparent financing, unless I have transparent financing, also transparent spending. I mean, this bill was written in a tortured way to make sure CBO did not score the mandate as taxes. If CBO scored the mandate as taxes, the bill dies. Okay? So it's written to do that. In terms of risk-rated subsidies, if you had a law which said healthy people are going to pay in, it made explicit that healthy people pay in and sick people get money, it would not have passed. Okay, just like lack of transparency is a huge political advantage. And basically, call it the stupidity of the American voter or whatever. But basically, that was really, really critical to get anything to pass. And, it's the second best argument. Look, I wish Mark was right. We can make it all transparent. But I'd rather have this law than not. So it's kind of like his reporter story. Yeah, there's things I wish I could change, but I'd rather have this law than not.
So first of all, you haven't publicly commented on this so far. Do you stand by the comments in that video?
The comment in the video were made at an academic conference. I was speaking off the cuff, and I basically spoke inappropriately, and I regret having made those comments.
But your point that you were making underneath the choice of words was actually quite nuanced. You were saying, essentially, correct me if I'm wrong, that due to political pressures, the language of Obamacare had to be somewhat opaque, somewhat lacking in transparency. Is that correct?
This is something we've seen going back actually through the Clinton and Bush presidencies, which is that public policy that involves spending is typically less politically palatable than policy that involves doing things for the tax code. It would have made more sense to do Obamacare the way we did in Massachusetts, which would be to just actually give people money to offset the cost of their health insurance. That was politically infeasible, and so instead it was done through the tax code, and that's the only point I was making.
Do you think that those pressures politically led to language in this law that affected sustainability adversely?
No, I don't. I think the pressures politically led to an incomplete law with some typos, which has led to this recent dramatic court case. But I don't think it really affects the sustainability.
Well, let's talk about that case. The Supreme Court just agreeing to hear that challenge to Obamacare, specifically based on this ambiguity of the law, it seems. This issue, in this case, is whether the federal Obamacare exchange, not just the state-run ones, can offer tax credits to low-income Americans. Do you think the somewhat tortured language of the bill opened it up to these legal attacks?
It's not really tortured language. It's just a typo. I mean, basically, remember, this law, the law that passed was essentially the Senate version. It was supposed to go to conference, and then when Scott Brown got elected, the Democrats didn't have the votes to put it through conference. They had to basically pass the Senate version, which had basically typos in it, and this is a typo. It's, first of all, not entirely clear if you look at the language what actually it means. One way to read it is that states with federal exchanges can't give subsidies. Another way to read it is that they can. But it's blatantly clear through the interpretation of the law that Congress completely intended these subsidies to be available to all the states.
So this is largely about the ambiguity of language. We'll be watching closely to see whether the Supreme Court errs on the side of what's in the text or the intentions you're ascribing to it. When you look at the news today as well, that the number of people covered by the ACA is going to be lower than projected, is that within the range of variability you would expect, or is that an ominous sign?
I think that the administration is being conservative. I think that the number is likely to be higher than that. I think there's one bit of good news behind their estimate, which is they're finding that employers are less likely to drop health insurance than the Congressional Budget Office estimated. The Congressional Budget Office estimated that part of the reason we get 13 million enrollees in year 2 is because we would have a number of employers dropping insurance. We're not seeing that as much, and that's part of the reason the administration lowered their number. That highlights the fact that this isn't really the relevant number. The relevant number is how many people gain health insurance coverage. That's what we care about. Right now, that number stands at about 10 million people have gained in year 1. We'll have to see where it goes in year 2.
Okay. The first area I can't be brief because, as an economist, it's my favorite, okay, which is the Cadillac tax. Let's talk about this for a minute. In America, we have a pernicious feature of our tax code, which says that if MIT pays me in wages, I get taxed. If your employer pays you in wages, you get taxed. But if your employer pays you in health insurance, you do not. So if MIT comes to me and they say, John, would you like a $1,000 raise, or would you like $1,000 of orthodontia benefits for your kid? I say, well, if I get the $1,000 raise, I take home about $600. But the $1,000 orthodontia benefits, I get $1,000 orthodontia benefit. So I get that, and my kid gets the braces that spin and change colors, and every month the new braces. Okay? So basically, this system, where this tax distortion, where some forms of compensation are taxed and others are not, causes three fundamental problems. First of all, it's expensive. If we taxed health insurance like we tax wages in America, we would raise $250 billion per year more. To fix ideas, that is twice what it would cost to cover every uninsured American with health insurance today. Twice. Okay? Second of all, it's regressive. It's a bigger tax break the richer you are. Because the richer you are, the bigger your tax rate is. So the way I like to describe this tax break is the government offers a bribe to employers to offer health insurance, and the richer you are, the bigger bribe they give. How can that make sense? Third, it's inefficient. As my brace example illustrates, people buy excessive amounts of insurance and get excessive amounts of health care because they are overinsured because this tax subsidy sort of induces them to do so. Now, in principle, we'd like to get rid of this. So, for instance, we can get rid of it, or we can even cap it. We could say, once your health insurance is above a certain level, we're not going to give you this tax break anymore. So I gave speeches, been giving speeches for a dozen years making this point. And I make the point, so I'll raise their hand and say, well, wait, you're going to tax our health insurance? I'd say, no. I'm going to end the tax subsidy to your health insurance. They'd look at me and they go, you're going to tax my health insurance? And you just can't get through. It's politically impossible. And so despite the fact we thought we might get as part of this law, it turned out it was going to be dead. Until the second Massachusetts hero arose, John Kerry. And John Kerry said, no, we're going to tax your health insurance. We're going to tax those evil insurance companies. We're going to impose a tax that if they sell health insurance that's too expensive, we're going to tax them. And conveniently, the tax rate will happen to be the marginal tax rate under the income tax code. So basically, it's the same thing. We just tax the insurance companies. They pass it on higher prices. That offsets the tax break we get. It ends up being the same thing. It's a very clever, basic exploitation of the lack of economic understanding of the American voter.